and welcome back to the garage with Bonesaw. Today we're looking at the British Tier 6 heavy tank, the Churchill Mk VII. Now the Churchill Mk VII is a very contentious tank. It's a bit like the ARL 44. Some players absolutely hate this tank and maintain that the Churchill series, I guess you could say the Churchill 1, the Churchill 7 and the Black Prince tank are all horrible tanks. And I could, I can see their point of view. I can agree where they are bad. But I'll be honest with you when I say I don't think they're that horrible. I drove the Churchill 1. I still have it in my garage because I'm grinding it to get the Churchill gun carrier. It was quite difficult just because it's listed as having a very heavy front armour. And the real life Churchill did have very heavy front armour. 177mm, that's great. Side and rear is not that great, but 177, that's 100mm more than anything else at Tier 5. And pretty much your only other competition at Tier 5 really is the KV and the T1 heavy. So that's ridiculously well armoured, supposedly. However, the front plate is covered with weak spots. You have this unusable 3-inch howitzer sticking out the front. You've got the driver's hatch. You've got the, I guess you could call it loader's machine gun, even though this gun isn't usable. And all this plate up here isn't actually 177mm, it's thinner. The only area on the front that's actually 177mm is down here. So most of the time you just get shot through the front plate and rapidly start losing that 700 hit points. But enough on the Churchill 1, because once you get through it, you get to the Churchill 7. The Churchill 7 is, I guess you could say, it is definitely an upgrade. You still do have weak points on the front, but they are much smaller, and the plates surrounding them, as well as the front glacis plate here and lower glacis, are also much thicker. Granted, it's not 177mm on the lower plate, but it is 152, and that's more than enough, especially when you angle yourself, and considering that the rest of it is 152mm as well. The turret is most certainly an upgrade. The turret on the Churchill 1 is one of your big weak points because it is very lightly armoured. This is the second turret that the Churchill 7 gets, and it has the same frontal armour as your hull does, meaning that it can be very resistant even with that interior gun mantlet. It's a pretty small target to hit. You also have these track guards, which are much better at protecting your tracks from splash damage and from enemies trying to blow your tracks off on the front drive sprocket. However, with guns, the two tanks are very similar. For the most part, if you've played through the Churchill 1, you will have this gun, the 75mm Vickers high velocity, and it's okay. It's comparable to the German L70 75mm gun. It has about 5mm less penetration. The accuracy is virtually exactly the same. Aim time's also very close, and the damage is almost exactly the same. The difference being is that the HV, the high velocity Vickers, seems to be very inconsistent. A lot of the time you'll fire a shot and it will go where you want it to, and then the follow-up shot will not. It'll miss the target completely, and against things like the KV, where you only really have a very small window to shoot at on the front of the tank, you really need to be able to place those shots correctly. And seeing as the KV's 85mm gun or the 122mm howitzer can significantly damage you in return, it puts you in a bit of a weak position. And it's very much the same with the Churchill 7 when you start driving it and you only have that 75mm high velocity. And it does feel a bit strange when the next upgrade to the tank is the quick firing 77mm, because it has exactly the same rate of fire. The average damage increases by 5 and your penetration increases by 3. And you have to go through this gun to get to the Black Prince. And it seems like a very, very questionable decision. However, there is one fact about this gun that is not listed in the basic stats, and that is it is much more consistent than the 75mm high velocity. This gun makes the tank a lot more enjoyable to play because you can actually sit at a distance, angle your hull, and just fire consistent shots into your enemy's weak points, and they'll be struggling to damage you in return. And that's really just, it was absolutely what this tank needed, and it really is the one thing I think you could say that really stops this tank from being utterly crippled. It's not bad. It's just that in terms of firepower, it really is on the weak side in terms of damage. Its penetration is fine, but in terms of damage is on the weak side, and that consistency is really what it needed to be able to continue to put out consistent damage. In terms of armour, the Churchill Mk VII can be quite resilient, provided you angle yourself. You want to try and use these track guards to cover up your weak points, much like in the ARL 44, and generally speaking, try not to let them shoot at your vulnerable mantlets or the hatches on front or on the side. Do expect to get tracked in this tank quite frequently, simply because they are the biggest targets on the vehicle. I wouldn't entirely recommend a repair kit on this tank, simply because you do get tracked so utterly frequently that it's really not a worthwhile investment, especially because you'll pay to repair your tracks and then more than likely they'll get blown off again. What is a good investment for this tank is a spall liner. Spall liners work amazingly on the Churchill tank because its heavy armour is great at repelling solid shot, great at repelling armour penetrating rounds, but the roof armour of the Churchill is rather thin and it has all these very square, flat sides, and so high explosive rounds are a nightmare for you. If you get wolf-packed by a bunch of Shermans or M4 Shermans, Panzer IVs, KVs with a 122mm howitzer, they'll just tear you to pieces with rapid-fire, high explosive. Adding a spall liner completely negates that, essentially, and it means you can really sit there and just be a durable attrition tank, which is really what this vehicle is designed to play as. You have 880 hit points, which is not huge, but it is a sizable amount, and you can definitely take a few hits. In terms of speed, you're not going to be going very fast. You only have about 20 kilometers max speed, and a trait of the Churchill tanks is that they do lose speed when you turn. In order to pivot on the spot, you need to pretty much come to a complete stop to do tight corners, things like that. And even just doing slight adjustments will lose you about anywhere between 3 to 4 kilometers of speed. Losing your engine on this tank is almost crippling, but once again, I would not recommend a repair kit unless you feel you absolutely need it. Generally, I find that, as with the tracks, if you've gotten to a point where you've taken critical engine damage or you've taken critical gun damage, things like that, you're generally in a position where you're going to die anyway, so it's not worth paying to repair it. Overall, this tank is a great urban fighter, very good in city maps where it can kind of dictate the flow of battle along streets. It can deny enemy flank opportunities because there are buildings either side of you to protect your sides, and you can really act as a bulwark along those narrow streets. It still can operate well on open maps. You're just much more vulnerable to being shot in the sides, and it's imperative that you kind of choose a flank where you know you will be supported, because the Churchill is quite slow. It does tend to get abandoned sometimes. The 77mm gun is excellent for supporting fire, especially against medium tanks. Against tier 6 mediums, this thing is an absolute monster. Generally speaking, they will struggle to penetrate your armour, even with guns like the L70 or the Kernish 75mm guns, especially with a spall liner, because it means that M4 variant M4 Shermans, such as the E8 or E2, if they're mounting the 105mm howitzer, can't do as much damage to you, and you can really be a good area denial tank. being aggressive with the Churchill is something of a tricky proposition. You need to plan in advance where you're going and know what is going to be there. Having good scouts on your team is important to proper play of the Churchill, because you need to know what you're going to run into, whether they can penetrate you, and if you're going to be supported in that advance. If you just drive blindly into an area that you think might be good, you'll often find you'll be facing something like a KV-1S, which will just put round after round through your front plate, and that will generally lead to your death. The Churchill is not a tank that can run from a fight, and it really can't chase opponents either. You need to dictate the fight on your terms. In the Churchill Mk VII, standard battle, tier 7 matching. Our top tank is a KV-3, enemy top tank is a Tiger H. Now I was a bit hesitant at the start of this game, because if you look at the top listing of the enemy team, they've got a Tiger H, a T-21, ARL-44 and a KV-2. All of these tanks are things that can cause me some significant problems. Either through means of penetration, in the case of the KV-2, that 152mm HE shell. That's just moving up here into the town to get some close-in combat. It's areas like this where the Churchill really can excel. It's quite good in urban combat, tight quarters. The 77mm gun has a very high rate of fire, and you can really rely on your armour to protect you. Alright. So I lose my viewfinder to T-34-1 there, but I'm cutting through him with my 77mm gun. His track's off. Fortunately, I just missed on that last shot there. My viewfinder is now back up, and I'm going to move around to engage the enemy. As you can see, casually bouncing shots from the light tank right there. 152mm of armour on the front plate of the Churchill VII, which is less than the Churchill Mk I, but more than enough generally at tier 6. It is covered in quite a few weak points though, so you do need to be careful. So taking out the KV-1 and bringing it around to engage the T-34. I'm going to ram him to stop him from escaping. Fortunately I miss on that shot, but finish him off. I do take a substantial hit from him, which isn't good, but at the same time is survivable. Alright, get 0 damage penetration on that KV-2. More substantial hit there, which is what we want. Put another hit to the KV-2. And finish him off. As you can see, the rate of fire on the 77mm gun is quite high, and in close quarters you really can dissect enemy heavy tanks, and your heavy armor can generally allow you to endure any return fire. You just have to make sure to angle it and try and let your tracks absorb some of the damage. Alright. Circling this Tiger here, but he's decided he wants to come around from behind, so I'm going to take out this A20 who was shooting at me earlier. Never pass up a free kill, kids. Alright, and this Tiger's coming around behind us. He puts one into me, but I return the favour as well. He's on a lot more health than me, so I'm just going to be very cautious. I don't want to go toe-to-toe with him yet. Because he can probably finish me off in about 2 shots, and he can penetrate me straight on. The penetration on the L71 gun, which he's mounting, is more than enough to go through my 152mm of armour if he hits it straight. But he's been outflanked, so I'm going to come around and shoot him in the side. Now that has more than likely taken his ammo rack, but I want to make sure, so I'm going to shoot him in the back of the turret. Probably either killed his loader or taken his ammo rack. Another straight side shot there, and finish him off with another one to the side. Now we do have a medium in our cap, and that's concerning us quite a bit. So Fegeline's decided he's going to return to cap while I move north with this KV3. Thankfully, however, it turns out our concern was unwarranted, as our KV1 just takes out the T25 back at cap. The enemy Su-5 and T-34, actually it's a Type T-34, are currently unaccounted for. We know where their AT-2 is. He's down in the train yard. So moving along the flank here, expecting to encounter that Type T-34. He's really not much of an issue. His top gun is 57mm. It cannot penetrate my front armour. I can more than easily penetrate him with my 171mm of penetration. Sorry, scratch that, it's 145mm of penetration. I was thinking of the 17-pounder, not the 77mm. As you've seen so far in the battle, the 77mm is very consistent, and a lot of people will say, well, why even bother getting the gun, aside from going to black prints? What advantage does it have over the 75mm Vickers high velocity, aside from a little bit more damage and a little bit more penetration? And it is that consistency you pay for. You see a lot of those shots are going very close to the centre. You can see I've taken his track off there, trying to get some of these side shots in. And unfortunately the KV3 takes him out, so I haven't gotten top gun off that one. And the Su-5 lurking in the rail yard there. And the KV3 gets him as well. So together we've got 9 kills this game, which is a pretty good effort for the team's heavy tanks. I'm going to sit here on cap to ensure that we still have cap superiority. I'm most assuredly too slow to head back to our cap. Fegeline's our fastest tank, so he's taking the lead on it. And his gun can penetrate a AT-2 if he aims in the right locations. I'm currently moving across the cap to see if I can get any flank shots across the rail yard into the AT-2. Trying to line up one down this alley. I don't quite have one. At least not one that's reliable enough to hit. As you can see there, I probably hit the railway carriages. But he's stopped capping, and so I've decided it's more than a worthy effort to put some flank shots into him. Fortunately, the KV3 moves into my line of sight, so I can't really take any shots at the AT-2 without hitting the KV3. Put a shot to the AT-2, but I miss, and my subsequent shot will more than likely miss. So the KV3 picks up that kill on the AT-2. So that's 5 kills on Ensk with the Churchill Mk VII.